Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Coding with T. Today we are going to learn Flutter Firebase authentication using email and password. We are going to learn how to register a new user, how to sign up a user, and also how to log out. Today's tutorial is going to be very useful for those, doesn't matter if you are new or if you are coming from experienced background. So let's quickly have a look what we are going to achieve. Let's run the application. At the start, you can see we have a little circular progress indicator. After that, we have login and sign up. So first, let's register the user. We are not currently going to target username and phone number, but definitely we are going to get this data and want to perform the phone authentication and also want to store the data. But for today's tutorial, let's say email and password. So email is admin@codingwitht.com and password is codingwitht.com. But in here you can see when we are going to refresh or reload the data, there is no such email exist. So let me just click on the sign up, make sure the internet is on, and you can see we are redirected to the dashboard, which will be the success scenario. And I have also added a login button at the top. But first, let's check if we have a registered user. So you can see admin@codingwitht has been registered. So let me just close this application, rerun it again. And this time you can see a little loader at the start, and then instead of going towards the login, sign up, and the welcome screen, we have redirected towards our dashboard. And our dashboard is working pretty fine. Again, you can get the code from the description below. So when I am going to click on this sign out, you can see we have redirected towards our welcome page. And in here, let's go to the login using same credentials, try to log in, click on the login button. And you can see we have redirected towards our dashboard with a successful login message. So this is what we are going to learn today. We are creating a Flutter login application. You can see the design has completed. You can download the design from the description below. And we are working on the right side, which is the backend. In the previous tutorial, we set up the Flutter Firebase. You can watch the previous video. Link is in the description or get it from the right top corner. Whereas today we are going to perform the Flutter Firebase authentication using email and passwords. So without directly start coding, first of all, let's quickly have a look what we are going to create and how we are going to create. The first thing is we need to enable the Firebase authentication, email and password inside our Firebase console. So we have to go towards the Firebase, enable it, add the authentication dependency inside our project. Once we have access to the authentication properties, we have to make sure when our application launches, it should check if the user is already logged in, user is not logged in, initialize all the Flutter Firebase. Once done, we are going to get the values from user, pass it toward the sign up controller, which is going to handle all the logic of sign up controller. This controller is not going to handle the Firebase authentication logic, so we will create another controller to keep a separation of concern, which is going to handle everything related to Firebase. So there will be two controllers, and then we are going to also create a logout button. So without wasting time, let's get started. Open Android Studio and we are inside the project we created for Flutter login application. Design is already completed. Remember, we first have to enable in the Firebase console. So open your browser, go to console.firebase.google.com. Remember, you have to open the same ID in which we have set up our Firebase. This is the project we created in our previous tutorial. Open it. And here you can see we have Android and iOS setup. You can click on this authentication. If not here, then in the build, or also we have authentication over here. Click on it. In here I have already enabled. So you will get started button. Click on it and this screen will be appeared. You just have to click on email and password. These are all the other methods. So you just have to click on it, enable the email and password. We don't need this because we have to configure it separately. So just save the button and you will be redirected to the user screen where we don't have any users created and no user is authenticated. So once done, head back to the project, open terminal. You just have to run flutter pub add Firebase authentication to add the Firebase authentication, and also you can get it from the flutter.dev website, and you just have to paste it over here inside the pubspec.yaml file. Let's close it. Once added, don't forget to run the flutter pub get. Okay, after that, inside our main application, we first have to tell the main application that before running or before generating widgets, you just have to initialize the Firebase. Widgets flutter binding dot ensure initialized. This line is going to ensure that initialization has been completed. So we are going to initialize for the Firebase dot initialized app, add a semicolon. Now inside we want to pass the options. If you don't want to pass the options, it's up to you, but the recommended way is to pass the options, which is just going to tell that to add a platform using default Firebase options with a current platform, either Android, iOS, or web. Once initialized, we will go inside the lib folder, inside the source, go to the features, authentication, screens, and you can see we have inside the screens, sign up is created. So this is the layout. We don't want to add logic inside our design. So this was the sign up form widget. You can see we have all the text fields over here. We will collect the data from these text fields, but we don't want to add logic inside the design. So what we are going to do, we are going to go to the controllers. I have created a sign up controller dot which is completely empty, a class which extends getX controller. Now to use this getX controller wherever we want, we have to create a static sign up controller, get instance, then use a fat arrow because get is a function, get dot find. That's it. Now we can easily call sign up controller dot instance and we can use our getX controller. Okay, next inside the sign up controller, we want to add all the text editing controllers because we want to get the data from our text fields. So for that, I have created these four fields: email, password, full name, and phone number. And the last thing inside our sign up controller will be a function which will be called when user is going to press the submit button. So it's a simple function which requires email and password as a parameters, and this is going to register the user. And you can see function will be called from the design. So once created, let's go to the form. Inside the widget, we first need to call the controller because we want to access everything over here. We can access the controller not by calling the instance, but using get.put sign up controller, and we have everything inside the controller. So when the form is going to be submit, so we need form key. Again, if you're new with the forms, you can watch crash course, Flutter basic crash course I have already defined, and I also drop the link down below in the description. Global key which will be of type form state. So this key will be inside the form like this. Now form have a key. This must be unique. Using controller, we can assign text editing controllers, controller dot full name, copy and paste for all others. So I have created a form key. I have created controllers for all the four fields: full name, email, phone number, and password. We are not going to save all the data, but we are going to perform the authentication. So for that, we just going to need email and password in our case, but in upcoming tutorials we will save all the data in our Firestore. So once we have all the data, we have a controller. When the user is going to press this button, we want to check if form key means the form is validated, current state validated. If it's validated, so this validated is going to be validate whatever the validation. We can add all the validators over here, but currently we don't have any validations. We will learn the validations in upcoming tutorials, but for today's tutorial there is no validation. But let's say form will be submitted when validations has been passed. We want to call our sign up controller, so we can call directly sign up controller dot instance dot, we have a function register user which requires email and password. So we can say controller dot email dot text. So we passed control using controller. We can pass email dot text dot trim, remove the spaces, and also with the password. And we are just calling the registered user password which has been created over here. Now in here we need to call the Firebase logic, or let's say we want to perform additional validations. We can do it over here. We can do whatever. First we want to authenticate, then we want to register the data inside the Firestore. We will also do that here, but for today's tutorial we're going to perform authentication. So in here in this controller there is no Firebase or anything. So let's close it, close the features, go to repository. I have created a new folder and also another folder repository which is authentication repository. Authentication repository, let's create a new file, authentication repository.dart. Okay, in here I have created a simple authentication repository class which is again extending getX controller, and we have a static instance like same like we have created previously. So for this specific class, as it is a Firebase class, so we need variables which are related to Firebase. In here you need to understand two things, that as we are performing authentication, so the first thing is we need authentication, which is the Firebase authentication, and the second thing is the user who has been authenticated or who is already been authenticated, right? So we need two things: Firebase authentication dot instance, and that's it. So this instance is same like the instance we have created. So this is for the Firebase authentication and this is for the authentication repository. Okay, so we have created authentication, all the authentication related items now inside our variable, which is a private final authentication. Now create another one which is final Firebase user. You can see it's not private because I have not added underscore with it. So we can easily access the user throughout our application because this user is going to contain the state. If user is logged in, if user is logged out, all the values of the user like email, phone number, password, etc. So we are not going to make it private. Okay, this Firebase user is of type user. Basically, you can see this user is same coming from the package we have added Firebase authentication and add a question mark because it can be nullable. Okay, here you need to understand one more thing that this user needs to be inside some stream because we want to get the latest values, and also whenever there is some change inside the Firebase user, let's say user is going to log in or log out, we want to perform some actions, we want to keep the user logged in even though he is going to close his application as we have seen in the example. So for that we have to convert this into either stream, or as we are using the getx, so we can easily convert it with the rx which has been provided from the getx. Now to initialize it, we want to make sure that when our application runs, it should check that if user is logged in, then redirect the user towards the dashboard. If user is logged out, redirect the user towards the welcome screen to perform login and sign up. So for that, we are going to press Ctrl O to override on ready function. This ready function will be called whenever this authentication repository is ready. And definitely your question is right that authentication repository must be called inside main.dart because whenever our application loads, we want to run this. We want to check if user is already logged in or not. So let's first initialize the user authentication dot current user. So this current user is basically the user. We need to add late variable because it is not initialized at the top and we are initializing it inside the onReady. So we just have to add a late method. Okay, now in here you can see it's giving an error because we have to add a cast. This cast is not going to work for you and might give an error. So recommended way is to add brackets around it. Just copy the one we have created at the top, add it over here, and the error is gone. This is not going to throw any type of error. So once we have initialized the Firebase user, now we want to give this user some stream from where user can fetch any change occur inside our Firebase. So we will say Firebase user dot bind stream. Stream will be coming from our authentication dot user changes. You can see at the top it's a current user. Firebase is a current user who has logged in or logged out. Authentication dot user changes. So this user changes is the one is a stream. When you hover over it, you can see it is a return type as stream of user, means it is always listening to the user. It's always seeing the user what he is doing. When the user is going to press the sign out or the logout button, it is going to inform this Firebase user to perform some action, right? So now Firebase user is informed, but he is want to perform some action. So for the action, we have a method which is ever, which is always ready to perform some action. So listener is Firebase user, he is listening. Whenever anything came new, this function should be executed. Let's create function. I am just saying to set the initial screen. You can perform whatever you like. Create method. Now if the user is null, this means the user has been already logged out, or just press the logout button. Then we want to redirect user to another page, not to. Off all means remove all the previous screens and redirect the user toward the welcome screen. If user is not null, this means user click on the login button and he has been authenticated. Then we want to redirect the user towards the dashboard. This is also going to run at the start. So let's say user is logged in but he closes the application. When he open the application again, this onReady will run again, and also going to check if user is null. Redirect to welcome screen. If user is already logged in, that there is no need to show the welcome and login screen again. Go to the dashboard. Now when the user has been redirected, we get the user. Now we want to create a function. Return type is void. Create user with email and password, string email and password. Inside we want to create using await method called authentication dot create user with email and password. This is the function. We have passed email and password at semicolon. Because this is await, add a sync method. So this will be turned as future. Return type is void. This will be returned as async. So as this is a cloud statement, this could throw an exception. So first thing that it should have a await at the start, and it should be wrapped inside try catch. Okay, you created try catch and call this statement inside the try. The first catch is basically on Firebase auth exception because we can easily get user-friendly code which is e.code. So this e is going to provide us some code. So we will see that in a minute, and we can easily catch the user-friendly exception and throw it because our application should not be crashed. Okay, this is for the sign up. Let's say user wants to log in using the email and password. You just have to change it to login with email and password. Again, we need email and password, and this only function is going to be changed. Just have to call sign in with email and password, pass email and the password, and that's it. Again, try and catch will work for this. Okay, after this, let's create a function which is going to log out. So logout is simple, another async function because it's a single line. So I have added fat arrows, await authentication dot sign out. Okay, now let's try to learn how we can create our custom exceptions. Inside the exceptions folder, let's create a new file. Okay, so I have created sign up email password failure dot inside the exceptions because we can add login with email and password failure, Google exceptions, phone number exceptions, and all the exceptions will go inside this folder. So inside you can see we have a single message, a single constructor. Let's make it constant. Using this dot message, add square brackets. With the this dot message, we can add a message, unknown error record. But to call in here, you can see we have to pass e dot code for the specific Firebase auth exception. So for that, we have to create factory constructor, or you can say the named constructor. Let's name it dot code, and as a variable, we will get code. This is the basic structure of the factory constructor, and we should return sign up with email password failure, which is this one. So in here, to identify which case has arrived, we are going to use switch add code. Inside we're going to create a case colon return sign up with email and password failure. Let's say some error, and as a default will have no case, will return the null. So default is going to return this, which means an error occurred, but in here we are going to pass the values. Let me create 2 to 3 cases. The first case is weak password with the message, please enter a stronger password, invalid email, email is not valid or bad formatted, and all the things. So let's close it, go back over here. To use this, I'm going to create a keyword. Final exception is equal to failure dot. Let's first import the class failure dot code, and inside we have to pass e dot code, and that's it. So basically this is the default constructor, but as we have a factory constructor, so we are calling factory constructor pass e dot code. Then we can also use a print statement to check what's the error. We can use the print statement to call Firebase auth exception and pass the message whatever has been received over here. And then also in the default, we can create a constant, call this default constructor, and again throw the default constructor. So press Ctrl Alt. Okay, in here, when the user is going to perform the email and password authentication successfully, or he has been created his account successfully, we want to redirect that user by checking if Firebase user dot value not is equal to null. Then we want to get dot off all, means remove all the previous screens, go to dashboard, otherwise go to welcome screen. So this value is basically, you can see it here, Firebase is the Rx type, but to get its inner value, we just have to call the dot value, and now it's pointing towards this user. If it's null, we want to perform this action. Okay, now in here you can see we have everything set up. So let's call this on ready inside the main.dart when application launches, and we want to make sure that Firebase has been initialized. After that, we are going to call dot then function, and inside we have to call get dot put, call our authentication repository, Control Alt L to align. Now whenever the application is going to be launched, Firebase will be initialized and our authentication repository will be get kicked or get initialized. It's going to come over here inside the onReady function, initialize the Firebase, convert it into bind stream to keep the Firebase user listening. And if there is any change, it's going to call this function. Okay, now let's try to run the application. Okay, so our application is running. You can see the welcome screen has appeared. Click on sign up, open the run method. Now inside, let's try to add email and password. So we have email and password. Let's click on the sign up button. It's not working because we forget to add or forget to call authentication register function in the register user. So in here we just have to call authentication repository, import it, dot instance dot create user with email and password. This is what we want to pass, and that's it. Let's save the code, delete it. Now let's click on sign up. You can see the error over here, which is Firebase auth exception, which is unknown error occurred because my mobile device, which is a physical device, is currently not connected with the internet. So make sure that you have an internet on. Let's click on sign up again. And at the bottom, you can see it has been redirected to the dashboard. Now let's open our Firestore and let's see the entry. So in here, let's see the entry if user has been created or not. Reload it, and you can see the mail we have entered is has been created inside the authentication. And also let me just close our application, rerun the application again, and you can see instead of going towards the login and sign up, we have been redirected towards the dashboard. So that's it for today's tutorial. One more thing, that if you are facing that your screen has been automatically redirected using the same design and you don't want the splash screen, you just have to not call the splash screen, but instead you can call circular progress indicator. Let's rerun the application. So it's running again. Okay, in here you can see again it's logged in automatically without showing any login sign up screens. So when I'm going to click on this button, I have added logout. As in the dashboard, you can see by going towards the dashboard app bar, inside its icon button, I have just call authentication repository dot instance dot logout function, the function we have created. And when I'm going to press on this icon over here at the top, it should logged out, and you can see welcome screen appears again. Let me just go to sign up, and everything is working. When I'm going to go back, screen has been closed because dot off has been called. So that's it for today's tutorial. I hope you learned something new. If you learned something new, please like the video, and if you are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified about the next upcoming videos about the Firebase, to get all the latest videos. And also you can get the source code from codingwitty.com. Thank you for watching. Take care. Allah Hafiz.